Welcome to everyone, FEP members of course, but also colleagues from all over the world. We're very happy that you've managed to squeeze this rendezvous in your busy Frankfurt schedule. Even a virtual Frankfurt remains a busy week with many competing events. So if some of your colleagues are busy with another webinar session, virtual meeting, we will post this recording later on the FEP YouTube page. Please share it. The voice of the MEPs must be listened so that we can have our voice heard too. Talking of voices, we had hoped to interview the Commissioner for Culture, Education and Research, Maria Gabriel. This weekend, Mrs. Gabriel informed us that she had been tested positive to COVID and therefore couldn't be with us as she's self-isolating. We wish her a very prompt recovery. We hope to be able to meet her soon in person. After this short introduction, FEP President Peter Kroes-van Cleef will open the rendezvous. He asked questions to the MEPs on culture and recovery, the Digital Service Act, artificial intelligence, and freedom of expression. 9 MEPs from a large political spectrum replied to this question. I wish to sincerely thank them. After these interviews, which will provide an insight into what the political parties might be doing on these topics, or at least a first understanding of it, Enrico will make a brief presentation on the FEP report on the consequence of COVID. I wish to thank the whole FEP team, and especially Roberta Baldussi, for her help in setting this rendezvous. Again, thank you for joining, and I sincerely hope to see you all in Frankfurt in 2021. To you, Peter.
So, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues and friends, and dear publishers, dear politicians, I wish we could stand together in Frankfurt and have a chat and have all the presentations. I wish we could have heard to the words of Commissioner Maria Gabriel. But that's the way it is. We're all digitally together, and that's a challenge for European publishers as well as librarians, booksellers, writers, and everyone in the creative industry. So we asked some of the members of parliament in Europe some essential questions on how to proceed, on their views on helping us on artificial intelligence and so on. And I'm very happy and pleased that they answered, and you'll see that later. And before that, I must say, I'm very happy to have a new team, the board of FEP. And my newly elected vice president is Riccardo Franco Levi from Italy. He's a pro both when it comes to publishing and when it comes to political affairs in Brussels. And with him, we have our longtime treasurer, Benedikt Vöger from Austria, a publisher from Vienna. And then there's Katrin Blasch from the French Publishers Association, Zachary Laiho from the Finnish Publishers Association, and Michiel Koolman from a big Netherlands publisher. And we're founding a team together, the board, which is helping to steer everything through and to help the FEP team. And I must say, I feel very comfortable being taken care of for European publishing affairs with a highly professional team with Anne Bergmann, Enrico Turin, Roberta Balduzzi, and Quentin, who take care of everything. And we hope to serve best for you in serving for the interest for European publishers, because in Europe, in Brussels, everything happens, which comes then to national law. And I thank you all for your attention. I hope you enjoy the following video session and also the insights from Enrico Turin for the COVID report. How did the European publishing community get along with the COVID-19 virus? How do we proceed? Thank you for your interest, and then we hop into the interviews. Thank you very much.
Dear members of European Parliament, dear members of the European Commission, dear colleagues from publishing authors, ladies and gentlemen, in the name of the Federation of European Publishers, I heartily welcome you to today's rendezvous, together with the newly elected board. with my Vice President, Riccardo Franco Levi from Italy, with our Treasurer, Benedikt Vöger from Austria, with our board member, Catherine Blasch from France, our board member, Michiel Koolman from the Netherlands, and Zachary Laio from Finland. And even just when looking at the board, you see how international FEP is. I wish I could have welcomed you in our regular meeting in Frankfurt, but since to very special circumstances, we just have this virtual meeting. I'm very pleased having you all here. Thanks for attending, and hopefully see you next year physically again in Frankfurt and sharing thoughts, ideas, and a sandwich. Once again, thank you for being with us. I may now have the chance to address to some of the MEPs who share the time with us. Thanks for being here. Usually we would be, I had already said, in Frankfurt, but now thanks for virtually being here. And I may now start asking some questions to our members of parliament. Dear members of parliament, thank you very much for being with us and for giving us some insights. First question we have, talking about Creative Europe and Horizon Europe, also about culture and funding. Can the culture and creative industries overcome this crisis, and how can the various EU funding support our sectors, especially the book world? Will the member states reserve 2% of the total expenditures of a recovery and resilience facility for cultural sectors, as the Parliament has asked for?
Few people would doubt that culture and creativity are essential elements for the European identity, for democracy and our societies. However, they are just as essential for the European economy. Probably not enough citizens and decision makers know that culture and creative industries employ millions of people, that they generate 4.2% of the EU's GDP, and that they are such powerful sources of jobs and growth that they provide jobs for nearly 2.5 times more Europeans than the automotive industry. As many of us have spent several weeks at home, it cannot have escaped us how fundamental culture is to us. Whether it be watching a film, listening to music, enjoying an online museum tour, or reading a book, culture matters so much to our everyday life. For me, it is crystal clear: if today we do not support our artists, writers, creators, and professionals working in cultural and creative sectors, it may have devastating consequences for our European cultural diversity and mean that we simply will not have access to the range of cultural content and expressions we do now. Crisis can be an opportunity as we begin to see things from another perspective. Let's use this opportunity to redefine our priorities. We need to protect and support our cultural and creative sectors and the people making up these industries. The European Commission and the European Parliament have been working together to form new policies and release funds towards the communities. Now we need to make sure that the new multi-annual financial framework and the recovery plan will include not only a focus but also dedicated money for culture and creativity. Thus, the Parliament adopted a resolution on the cultural recovery of Europe, calling that from the recovery fund at least 2% should be exclusively dedicated to the cultural and creative sectors. Especially on the book sector, the spread of coronavirus had a direct impact on the working situation of writers, publishers, translators, and all people working in the sector. Events, readings, especially in schools, libraries, cultural institutions and bookshops, award ceremonies, book fairs, workshops, lectures, and residency scholarships have been cancelled. The world's largest book fair, the Frankfurt Book Fair, is taking place online. Small publishers are being particularly hard hit by the coronavirus crisis. The cancellation of book fairs, as well as those of literature festivals and reading tours, and the lockdown have made their books virtually invisible. Even before COVID-19 pandemic, bookstore presence and sales are essential, especially for smaller publishers. But bookstores are also enormously important for the industry as a whole, even in the internet age. Almost half of all books are still normally bought there. I salute the creativity and flexibility of smaller bookstores organizing their own supply chains, for example, via City Courier and Bicycle Messenger. There were numerous cooperations with companies in the neighborhood that had not to close, such as pharmacies, grocery stores, butchers, bakers, and so on. This works because often bookstores are part of the neighborhood and are close-knit into the community.
Culture and creative sector is indeed in a deep crisis and is among the hardest hit sectors in Europe. It is estimated that the output gap has reached around 80% in the second quarter of this year, and the rest of 2020 doesn't look very promising either. As a result, the sector has lost tens of millions of euros and cost jobs and income to thousands of talented people. To help rectify the situation, it is a crucial task of the sector to continue pushing for the cause, making sure that policymakers understand not only the social and symbolic, but also the economic value that creative culture sector can bring. Too often, culture is seen as a supplement to other industries, whereas the truth is that creative culture sector constitutes around 4% of the member states' GDP and employs millions of people. It also actively stimulates other industries, such as tourism and hospitality business. Moreover, investment in culture can actively contribute to sustainable growth. With the green and digital objectives high on the EU's agenda, creative culture sector is best placed to actively lead the necessary economic and social transition. But the cultural and creative sector does not merely need handouts. It needs targeted investment so that it emerges stronger from this crisis. The European Parliament's Culture and Education Committee has been at the forefront of promoting the creative culture sector's cause. Among other things, we are continuously calling for a larger Creative Europe budget, and thanks to us, the Parliament has adopted a resolution that not only clearly states the grim state of the sector, but also calls for the 2% earmarking for creative culture sector from the Recovery and Resilience Facility. In that way, we are sending a clear message also to the member states' governments. But the job is far from done. Yet, I remain optimistic that there is a momentum behind the creative culture sector and our combined energy invested will not go to waste.
I would like to thank the Federation of European Publishers for inviting me to participate in this event, and to the Frankfurt Book Fair, the largest in the world, for their great adaptation ability to allow this event, which serves mainly to celebrate books and reading, to take place under the present circumstances. My country, Spain, was going to be the guest of honor next year, 2021, and finally it will be in 2022. So I can assure you that we will come with much more strength, trying to make the most of this delay by improving our project and programming. As you may know, on September the 17th, the European Parliament adopted a resolution on the cultural recovery of Europe, expressing its sincere solidarity with performers, artists, creators, authors, publishers, their companies, and all other cultural creators and workers, who all have been severely affected by the global COVID-19 pandemic. In this resolution, we called the Commission and the Member States to earmark for the cultural and creative sectors and industries according to their specific needs, at least 2% of the Recovery Plan and Resilience Facility. This is just a fair and a proportionate request, considering that cultural and creative sectors represent 4% of Union's GDP and have been among the most affected by the lockdown. However, this sector is not just a core asset of the European economy. Beyond its contribution in terms of turnover or employment, European book and publishing sector is a fundamental pillar for our cultural diversity, offering readers more than 500,000 new titles per year, which are essential to protect and to promote the European culture. While much work remains to be done to ensure that our demands are finally met, we will continue working aiming to protect cultural and creative industries. And in this regard, the S&D, my group, have already presented an initiative for the creation of an ambitious European culture bond so that the reactivating cultural habits and spending. This proposal will be financed by contributions from the budget of the Union and the Member States, aiming especially at unemployed and young people. Beyond the initiatives carried out at the European institutions, I would like to congratulate the book sector for the development of a large number of cooperative projects, mostly aimed at digitizing services and sales in order to overcome the crisis.
Hello, my name is Niklas Niemes. I'm a member of the European Parliament for the Greens, a member of the Cult Committee, as well as the Regional Development Committee and the Committee for Institutional Affairs. I'm very thankful for the questions that you proposed to me, and I want to try to answer them very briefly. It's very hard because they're very far-reaching. First of all, the culture and funding question. Well, how can this industry and the whole culture and creative sector get through this crisis? It's very hard, and I think we need way more support. We have 4% of the GDP are distributed from the culture and creative sector, so I think at least 4% should go into the culture and creative sector. We at least could manage to broker a deal between all groups so that we have this amendment for the RRF asking for 2%. That's something that I try to manage, and I'm very happy that all the other members joined me in this cause. But we are not done with the 2%. First of all, this needs to go through Parliament, that's what we are working on, but it also needs to go through the trilogue and through the Council. So please do me a favor, go and lobby the Council, the Member States, the governments and the parliaments of the Member States. Lobby with them, tell them why it is important that the sector, that the whole industry get support from the RRF. You know, we have started the kick for culture and creative sector in the Horizon Europe program. We will support you through the InvestEU program as far as we can. The negotiations are sadly already done. They were done. The Parliament's position was done before I entered Parliament, so there's nothing we can do at the moment. However, in later stage, we will try to reserve some money for the industry, and then also please again lobby at the national parliaments for the Creative Europe budget, because we want to double it, as you know, and I think that's also in your interest. So please go ahead and talk to Council, who's really blocking there.
Alors je tiens tout d'abord à remercier la Fédération européenne de l'édition pour cet échange d'un type un peu particulier. Je tiens également à saluer mes collègues députés européens qui participent, et Madame Maria Gabriel, commissaire européenne en charge de l'innovation, la recherche, la culture, l'éducation et la jeunesse. Alors, votre question nous interpelle tout d'abord sur notre relation au livre et sur nos modes de consommation. Alors, le plaisir d'être dans une librairie, de pouvoir feuilleter les ouvrages avant de les acheter, de découvrir un livre insoupçonné au détour d'une table, ça, on ne peut pas le vivre en parcourant les sites internet. Et la compétence du libraire qui nous connaît, qui connaît nos goûts, qui sait nous conseiller, n'aura jamais la même valeur qu'un algorithme qui nous adresse une publicité ciblée. Donc nos librairies physiques, elles ont toute leur utilité dans nos territoires. Elles sont des espaces de vie culturelle, d'échange. Et moi j'ai la chance d'être dans un pays européen, la France, qui a plutôt bien protégé ses librairies, grâce au prix unique du livre, obligation à laquelle même des sociétés comme Amazon sont contraintes de se soumettre. Et nous avons également le Centre national du livre, le CNC, qui soutient les différents éléments de la chaîne du livre. Donc ces dispositifs nous permettent d'avoir un réseau relativement dense de librairies. Néanmoins, je suis bien conscient que cela n'est pas le cas sur l'ensemble du territoire européen. C'est d'ailleurs pour ça qu'on se bat. Par ailleurs, ces librairies physiques sont des acteurs qui participent à la vie économique quotidienne, au plus près de nos concitoyens, et cela, contrairement aux grandes plateformes du secteur, qui s'évertuent à ne pas payer d'impôts sur les territoires où elles vendent leurs produits. Alors vous me demandez, que peut faire l'Europe et comment le Parlement européen peut-il contribuer à soutenir les entreprises locales et la diversité culturelle? Tout d'abord, il y a quelques principes de base. Les plateformes d'hébergement de contenu qui ont pour objet la vente en ligne, je parle des marketplaces, et je pense naturellement aux plus grosses comme Amazon, doivent respecter les droits des consommateurs, c'est-à-dire leur permettre de bénéficier de droits équivalents à ceux qu'ils auraient dans des lieux de vente physique. Ça, c'est la première chose. En outre, lors du précédent mandat, au sein de la commission Econ et des commissions taxes, nous avons mené un gros combat pour que les entreprises payent leurs impôts dans les pays où elles réalisent leur chiffre d'affaires. Nous avions obtenu quelques avancées, notamment ce qu'on appelle le reporting pays par pays. Mais ça ne va pas assez loin. Et il est urgent que l'Europe, l'Union européenne, renforce vraiment la lutte contre la fraude et l'optimisation fiscale, parce que les sommes sont colossales. Par exemple, la fraude à la TVA permise par les grandes plateformes représente une perte pour les États membres de 137 milliards d'euros, alors que les commerces physiques payent, eux, évidemment, tous leurs impôts. Et nous sommes donc face à une concurrence déloyale, directement financée par
Je suis Laurence Farin, je suis membre du Parlement européen et coordinatrice de la commission culture pour mon groupe Renew Europe. Je voulais vous dire merci d'abord pour votre invitation. Je remercie le président et le vice-président de la Fédération des éditeurs européens pour cette invitation, car je suis réellement très heureuse d'être avec vous, même à distance aujourd'hui, pour vous dire tout mon soutien et tout mon soutien au secteur du livre et à celles et ceux qui le font vivre. C'est vrai que ce secteur, il vit, comme tous les secteurs de la culture, une crise très paradoxale, avec d'un côté les lieux qui ont été fermés, la difficulté de continuer à produire, à imaginer, à écrire et à faire naître des livres, alors même que les Européennes et les Européens nous disent tous leurs besoins et nous ont prouvé tous leurs besoins de s'évader par la lecture, qui a constitué véritablement un vrai refuge dans cette crise. Alors ce soutien, nous l'avons exprimé au Parlement européen en votant une résolution pour la relance culturelle européenne. Et c'est pas un petit soutien, parce que 87% du Parlement et des députés ont soutenu cette résolution qui demande à la fois plus de moyens, en disant il faut absolument qu'il y ait un minimum d'argent du plan de relance européen qui soit fléché par la culture. Nous demandions au moins 2%.
Good afternoon. I am very pleased and above all honored to take part, even though virtually, at the annual Frankfurt Book Fair, organized by the Federation of European Publishers, whom I wholeheartedly thank for the invitation. As an MEP, but also as a reader, of course, as a philosophy teacher and as a writer myself, I know the importance of the book in our culture, in our societies, and of all the book industry. And this year we know it has been challenging for the publishing sector. Cancellation of literature festivals and reading tour, print book sales drop with stores closed, postponement or in some cases cancellation of many planned new titles. The current health crisis weighed heavily on the European publishing industry. Small publishers were being particularly hard hit, as many of them have not been able to use the government's support schemes. The coronavirus pandemic has brought the literary world to a halt, as getting books into readers' hands gets even harder than usual. But meanwhile, e-commerce company Amazon, which represents a central distribution channel for publishers, is emerging from the crisis with an even greater market share of book sales. But let us not be silent nor naive in the face of a clearly unfair competition that causes to the publishing sector serious and irreparable damage. In this regard, fairer and balanced taxation of big tech companies must be in Europe our political priority. Due to the current health crisis, online sales have doubled or even tripled, and that only for the month of April. However, traditional companies, SMEs, which have been the most affected by the lockdown, continue to bear a tax burden nearly 2.5 times higher than digital companies do, namely due to their tax optimization strategy. For instance, Amazon had a negative tax of 1% in 2018, despite the colossal profits the company has been making. According to the European Commission, digital companies are taxed, on average, at an effective tax rate of 9.5% compared to 23.2% for traditional companies. This system is profoundly unfair, and the absence of a level playing field results in the situation where traditional companies carry a heavier tax burden than big digital platforms. Consequently, a fair and calibrated tax on digital services is a sine qua non condition for ending the law of the survival of the fittest in favor of healthy competition. A consensus must be found on this question at the European level in order to strengthen the fight against unfair trading practices and to reinforce the resilience of our European SMEs.
Ad oggi il Parlamento europeo ha espresso una posizione molto chiara sui settori culturali e creativi. Lo ha fatto con una risoluzione voluta fortemente dal gruppo dei socialisti e democratici che vincola il complessivo del recovery plan, del piano di rinascita, al 2% di quel budget proprio per i settori della cultura, del digitale, della creatività, della scrittura, tutto il comparto culturale, e questa diventerà ed è diventata una indicazione perentoria per i piani attuativi degli Stati nazionali, e questa è già una buona notizia. La seconda è che dobbiamo continuare a lavorare sul bilancio pluriennale dei programmi ordinari, come ad esempio Europa Creativa, di cui mi occupo direttamente, e lì dobbiamo provare a spuntare quote di bilancio sempre più importanti su Europa Creativa, così come su Orizzonte Europa ed altri strumenti, sia relativi appunto al Recovery Plan e anche relativi al bilancio ordinario dell'Unione. Le vicende della cultura non sono vicende secondarie. Il modello di sviluppo dell'Unione Europea si modifica se noi investiamo in un nuovo modello di sviluppo. Questo nuovo modello di sviluppo, come ci indica la Presidente della Commissione, è fatto dalla transizione ecologica, dall'innovazione e dalla conoscenza. E nella conoscenza tanta parte possono avere le piattaforme immateriali, la creatività e appunto tutto il comparto culturale. Ma intanto una buona notizia, perché la Commissione Cultura del Parlamento ha chiesto risorse straordinarie d'emergenza da mettere a disposizione proprio del settore dei media, della stampa, della produzione dei contenuti, perché quello che è successo durante la pandemia ha messo a dura prova un settore già fragile nel contesto europeo.
And now please come to the Digital Service Act. Our sector is healthier when we enjoy a large number of outlets where the readers can have access to books. While this is largely the case for physical bookshops, the internet shows, however, a different landscape, with a giant company thrusting most of online sales in most European countries either directly or through its marketplace. What can Europe do, and how can the EP be an instrumental in supporting local businesses and cultural diversity? What's your opinion on that?
The crisis hit at a time when most companies were already looking to build up their e-commerce business, and the book industry is probably ahead of the curve. There, compared to many consumer products, but the coronavirus has been called the great accelerator, and that's true in the books business as much as anywhere else. People are buying more books online, and once habits have changed, there's no going back. When talking about the online sales, we need to keep in mind that the internet is governed by algorithms, which often lack transparency. Books that sell well will sell even better online. The online world is always a case of the winner takes it all. It has reinforced the bestseller branded books, classics, and big backlist books. And as people buy more of their books online, it becomes much more difficult to create the visibility for new authors and showcase them up against established ones. Sadly, it's going to be increasingly hard for debut authors to come into the business, no matter how good they are. In a bookshop, a new author has a chance to be seen. Online, it's just very hard, because the way people buy books online is different from the way people buy them in a bookstore. Online sales are weighted towards books with proven performance. That's how the algorithms work. They use data on past sales so they can sell more of what they are really selling. A new author, by definition, does not have data showing previous sales. That's why we need to make sure that when thinking about the new Digital Services Act or regulations touching upon artificial intelligence, rules are put in place that ensure that no not only well-known and already successful books are promoted, but debut authors and niche content can also get their fair chance to be found online. Books are obviously essential. How and with what should a population in crisis arm itself intellectually and educate itself further? No newspaper in the world, no press conference can replace the gain of information by reading literature. Our society needs literature, especially in times of crisis, to calm their nerves, for edification, to pass the time, for consolation, or to gain knowledge. With the help of the sector, we need to remain vocal about the importance of, among others, literature, learning material, history and poetry for our societies, not only at European level, but also at national and regional level. Literature is of systematic relevance. Books of all kinds have helped people in Europe to live through the past months of the pandemic, where social contacts have been strictly limited. They open up a whole new world to us. They educate us, they entertain us, inspire us. So let us dream. These are the powers of literature, the importance of which has been made emphatically obvious during the COVID-19 lockdown. We must bring these powers of books to the attention of governments and people. It must not be taken for granted.
Another crucial point, which is also decisive for the publishing sector and where we need to act without delay, is the question of interoperability. Up against very high market concentration levels of large platforms, with a gatekeeper position, we are confronted with the situation of the self-referencing and foreclosure of markets. Users, businesses, and consumers alike are captured in certain ecosystems that clearly lead to the creation of entry barriers for competing platforms or complementary service providers. The dominant platforms have a growing power of economic influence over the ecosystems that are formed around them. For instance, in the book industry in particular, a reader purchasing an ebook on Amazon cannot view their book outside of the Amazon Kindle ecosystem. It is therefore essential to put in place an interoperability principle to ensure a free, digital, commercial environment where consumers can freely choose their terminal without risking being eventually limited in their choice of supplier of cultural content. Interoperability is of the essence in the development of the digital book market, as it helps to create the conditions for a competitive environment that promotes diversity of players in the digital publishing. The EU has to take an unwavering stance and to act boldly in order to support our digital economic model while enhancing cultural diversity. In this regard, the new Digital Service Act package should offer clear rules and guidelines to the dominant gatekeeper platforms on their responsibilities and obligations. Not only should this act prohibit all kinds of discriminatory practices, but also guarantee a transparent and fair online playing field based on equal opportunities and an adequate level of user protection. With my colleagues from the Culture and Education Committee, we made it clear: protection of intellectual property, liability of the marketplaces, providing misleading information, cultural diversity accompanied by solid guarantees of fundamental rights must be at the center of any future regulation of digital platforms. This set of principles remains vital to our European values, and we must not compromise on them. With this in mind, I am very much looking forward to working together on all of the aspects that might contribute to a bright and legally secure future of the publishing industry. I want to thank you again for your invitation. I wish you a very useful fair. Long life to the books. Vive les livres. Merci encore.
Il y a aussi la question du soutien au secteur en surveillant toutes les grands textes et directives qui vont être déposés et transposés. À ce titre, je citerai le très important travail que nous faisons actuellement sur un texte qui s'appelle le Digital Services Act et qui vise à réguler les plateformes qui sont si déterminantes dans la concurrence aujourd'hui face aux librairies indépendantes, face aux libraires. Et là encore, je voulais vous dire tout notre soin et notre attention donnée pour qu'elles ne soient pas toute puissance, ces plateformes, et que le secteur du livre reste bien vivant.
Le rapport DSA, Digital Service Act, sera voté la semaine prochaine. Nous pouvons noter de réelles avancées par rapport à la directive e-commerce qui date de l'an 2000, notamment dans le domaine de l'interopérabilité des données et de la protection des consommateurs. Les plateformes vont devoir, par exemple, assurer une interopérabilité, une portabilité effective des données en fournissant une interface adéquate. Et le fait de ne pas être dans un environnement propriétaire en silo, comme on dit, devrait permettre de réduire le quasi-monopole des plateformes. Mais je pense que nous devons aller plus loin. C'est pourquoi j'ai déposé des amendements pour la prochaine séance plénière. Je vais tenter de convaincre mes collègues qu'il faut interdire le marché européen aux plateformes du e-commerce qui ne prendraient pas toutes les mesures nécessaires pour faire cesser la vente de produits illégaux, comme par exemple les contrefaçons, les copies piratées, sujet que vous connaissez un peu pour le livre papier, mais évidemment surtout pour le livre numérique. Il est très important et même vital dans cette période très dure de restrictions causées par la pandémie, de soutenir les commerces locaux, donc évidemment les librairies. Et le DSA, le Digital Service Act, est une étape importante. Mais pour obtenir des plateformes un comportement pleinement responsable, la régulation du marché, elle nécessite à l'évidence bien d'autres améliorations. C'est pour ça qu'on se bat, et c'est pour ça qu'on se bat ensemble.
But if you ask any expert, is artificial intelligence, which is described as the next digital revolution, which could have an impact on the book sector at all levels. What opportunities or risks do you see in the coming years regarding artificial intelligence, and how could the EU accompany this revolution in a way that empowers the book value chain?
Il y a aussi la question de l'intelligence artificielle que nous allons suivre de près pour que là encore, l'expression artistique, pour que la diversité culturelle reste au cœur de nos valeurs et de nos œuvres. Enfin, je voulais vous dire que moi, à titre personnel, j'avais participé la semaine dernière dans ma ville, j'habite dans une ville du sud-ouest qui s'appelle Pau, à un festival du roman noir qui se tient chaque année et qui a pu se tenir alors dans des conditions particulières parce que, bien sûr, les auteurs qui nous rejoignent habituellement des 4 continents n'ont pas pu faire le voyage, mais que la présence chaleureuse du public avait marqué toute l'importance et toutes les attentes qu'il y avait pour faire vivre, revivre et déployer le secteur que vous représentez. Je vous souhaite un très bon travail, un très bon salon et je vous dis, je l'espère, à très bientôt.
In fact, digitization and the emergence of AI technologies is the other topic I want to focus on. Digitalization is one of the major priorities for the Commission for this legislature, and foster and regulate the AI-related technologies are among the main lines of action of the European Digital Plan. Artificial intelligence technologies are going to have a great impact in all sectors of the economy and society, and therefore we need to draw principles for governing these technologies to ensure that fundamental rights of Europeans are not put at risk on its development, deployment and use. Indeed, as a member of the Jury Committee in the European Parliament, I presented last week a report for the regulation of ethical aspects of artificial intelligence. With this regulation, Europe will become a world leader on the topic, and we will prevent many of the possible risks that these technologies entail. While there is still a long way to go before an algorithm can really produce a bestseller, the use of these technologies will allow, for example, improving areas such as marketing, production and distribution in the very short term. Anyhow, we also have to reflect on the intellectual property rights topics to ensure respect for the author's rights and fair remuneration of human creators whose original work is used to power such technologies. I would also like to emphasize that the implementation of AI technologies will not mean the loss of jobs, but their transformation and therefore The Union must make a great commitment to the digital illustration of all citizens. Going beyond so-called digital skills, we must create a society with holistic digital capabilities in all areas that shall enable a critical and safe use of technology. To conclude, I would like to stress that a great deal of investment and collaboration between the public and private sectors will be necessary to ensure that the digitization of the sectors leaves no one behind. We both, private sector and public institutions, have a great challenge ahead. Vielen Dank and guten Buchmesse.
Artificial intelligence is an important field with rising relevance, and its influence in all industries is going to be felt in the next decades. To start with, I see a lot of opportunities thanks to continuous advances in machine learning. If we look at the culture and creative sector alone, the artificial intelligence will increasingly be able to augment the role of visual artists, designers, musicians, and writers. In a foreseeable future, artificial intelligence will be able to help carry out highly technical and also some of the boring tasks, thus enabling the artists and culture workers to focus on what they are best at, creativity. For writers of books, artificial intelligence will be able to more effectively help with tasks such as translation, language construction, and in limited cases, the writing itself. And for the book sector in more broadly, artificial intelligence can already be utilized in marketing to increase discoverability of books and personalized suggestions. Going forward, I believe that ongoing advances will lead to reliable voice searches and translation, thus expanding accessibility to books and saving money for publishers. Regarding the European Union's role in the artificial intelligence, it is first and foremost important that we embrace it, not stifle it. I agree that regulation is necessary as it is for any other sector, but that at the momentum it seems that the starting point is verging on a fear as to what the artificial intelligence will do to the industries, to workers, and to the society. The European Union's and indeed the Member States' investment in the artificial intelligence is vastly lagging behind that our major competitors. At the same time, the demand for artificial intelligence studies exceeds the supply, while a large share of the brightest artificial intelligence minds end up working in Silicon Valley and elsewhere. If these trends continue, the European Union risks falling behind to such an extent where we won't be able to catch up with countries ahead of us and will be shaped by technologies and artificial intelligence applications developed elsewhere. So, investment in artificial intelligence is a key for Europe's digital aspirations and for creating artificial intelligence augmented world, just the way we want to see it. As with any other major innovation in the past, embracing artificial intelligence will enable economic growth and increase productivity, thus also improving the quality of life for people. In short, more artificial intelligence will ease our workload and increase our leisure time, so I believe we will have time to read more books.
Us publishers, as well as for all authors and journalists, freedom of expression is a key issue. Without freedom of expression, no publishing, and without publishing, no freedom of expression. Why, according to you, are some constantly opposing two fundamental rights, the right of freedom of expression and the intellectual property right? That is Article 11 and 17 of the Charter of Fundamental Rights. How can these two fundamental rights for authors, publishers and booksellers be reconciled?
Eppure la libertà di espressione passiva ed attiva riguarda proprio i principi fondamentali dell'Unione. Passiva significa poter avere la possibilità di scelta e anche della libertà e dell'autonomia delle fonti informative, attiva la possibilità di scelta da parte dei cittadini rispetto a un plafond di opportunità informative non omologate. E quindi il tema della libertà d'espressione ha a che vedere fino in fondo con i principi dello Stato di diritto e della democrazia, e spesso anche l'Europa è al centro di incursioni di altre entità nazionali o grandi imprese, grandi corporation che mettono in difficoltà diciamo la piena e totale libertà d'espressione e la piena e totale fruizione di fonti libere dalle quali noi prendiamo le nostre informazioni. In più è fondamentale la battaglia fatta negli anni passati sul diritto d'autore, cioè di come noi tuteliamo i produttori di contenuti, gli artisti, gli scrittori, i giornalisti, rispetto alla potenza legittima ma molto forte, una simmetria di potere tra il singolo produttore di contenuti e le grandi corporation, le grandi piattaforme dell'intrattenimento, dell'informazione sovranazionali. Quindi l'Unione Europea ha necessità di investire e tutelare la libertà d'espressione, perché per il mezzo della libertà d'espressione si esprime la piena cittadinanza europea e dunque anche la piena vita democratica del nostro continente.
On the question of freedom of expression, I have to say that's a very hard one, because they have two very important rights standing by side. They support each other, but sometimes they also infringe each other. One of them being the freedom of the arts, very important, especially at this moment, where we see funding being cut for, or funding only being proposed for certain topics that the governments want to be supported by. In Poland, for example, you only get funding if your program supports country, God, and nation, and that's something where free culture cannot thrive. Obviously, that's the plan of the party there. But then, other than that, we also have the. So I think it's important that creators can live off their work, and that's why we need this right for intellectual property. That you can have, that you have a right of your work, because there's a lot of work being put into that, and then you should also obviously get the remuneration of that. However, I think we walk on a very slippery slope. If we have too less property rights, freedom of the arts will suffer. But if we have too much, it could suffer as well. We have to ensure that nobody can steal each other's property, intellectual property, and then make money with it. But we also need to ensure that there's the possibility that you can create something out of the old. That's also very important. In the end, I would like to say two general remarks. First of all, congratulations to Peter Kraus von Cleff, who was elected as president. So congratulations from my side. The other remark is, as you have probably known, we have funded the Culture Creators Friendship Group, in which we want to bring together MEPs who are interested in culture, saving culture, and the diversity that we have in Europe, as well as stakeholders, the Commission, and everybody in the sector, to bring them together and to have a discussion, and want to invite you all to our meetings there, and then have the discussions right there on these very critical questions. And so you're very much welcome to join us there. It would be very interesting for us to hear from your side and to help each other out to make the culture and creative sector thrive in future once again. Thank you very much and have a great day. Stay safe, you all.
Το πλήγμα που έχει δεχθεί ο πολιτισμός από το COVID-19 είναι πολύ μεγάλο. Εκτιμάται στο 80% του κύκλου εργασιών του τομέα κατά τη διάρκεια του δευτέρου εξαμήνου του 2020. Η πρόεδρος της Επιτροπής, κατά τη διάρκεια της ομιλίας της στην κατάσταση της Ευρώπης, αγνοεί παντελώς τον πολιτισμό. Δεν υπάρχει ούτε μία αναφορά για τον πολιτισμό στο λόγο της. Ωστόσο, το Ευρωπαϊκό Κοινοβούλιο προχθές πέρασε ένα ηχηρό και σημαντικό μήνυμα υπέρ του πολιτισμού, υπερψηφίζοντας με μεγάλη διαφορά το ψήφισμα για την ένταξη του πολιτισμού στο μηχανισμό ανάκαμψης και ανθεκτικότητας. Και φυσικά να περάσει και μία από τις μεγάλες διεκδικήσεις μου, τη δέσμευση του 2% από τον μηχανισμό ανάκαμψης και ανθεκτικότητας για τον πολιτισμό. Ελπίζουμε αυτή η πίεση να φέρει τα επιθυμητά αποτελέσματα. Εμείς θα συνεχίσουμε να εργαζόμαστε και να πιέζουμε να ενταχθεί ο πολιτισμός στους στρατηγικούς τομείς της οικονομίας της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης. Όπως έλεγε και ο Ζαν Μονέ, από τους μεγάλους αρχιτέκτονες της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης, ο πολιτισμός παίζει στρατηγικό ρόλο για την ευρωπαϊκή ενοποίηση. Και εμείς πιστεύουμε ότι ο πολιτισμός μπορεί να λειτουργήσει σαν καταλύτης για τη γεφύρωση των όποιων διαφορών στις κοινωνίες μας.
Good afternoon. I'm going to take you now through a brief journey around what happened to the book sector during the pandemic. This is a presentation that results from an initiative by the Federation of European Publishers, for which I work. I'm, again, Enrico Turin. Hi to everyone. This is a work that the Federation did when the pandemic hit Europe. We immediately activated a daily exchange of information with our members to know what was going on in their respective countries, both in terms of the impact on the market and the initiatives taken, the measures taken to support the sector. All this information went into a report that we published back in July, which I invite you to check out on our website, because I won't go much into the detail of the data in this presentation. I'll just take you through a brief tour. And then we are also counting to update this report towards the end of the year for a more comprehensive picture. So what happened when COVID-19 hit Europe, what happened to the book market? But first and foremost, all bookstores closed. There was an unprecedented situation. All retail, or almost all retail outlets for books, all the places where people could buy books, were all of a sudden closed. So obviously, back in March, sales plummeted everywhere, with drops in sales in bookshops around 75 to even 95%. By the end of the month, in many countries, sales were really at a minimum. And not only did sales decrease, but there was also a problem with the titles postponed. Thousands of new titles that were due to come out in the spring and the summer had to be postponed or even canceled. And also all other kinds of events that literary or book events had to be canceled. The impact was quite visible, for example, on book fairs. Many book fairs were affected. They had to be moved, shifted online, or canceled altogether and just report to the following year, including, well, Frankfurt, which this year is taking place online. So yeah, first obvious impact was a loss of turnover everywhere. By April, with a lot of countries in lockdown, the book sector had basically ground to a halt. And sales in bookshops that month were down 90% in a number of territories. Of course, booksellers got creative in many places and tried to deliver books as best as they can to their readers. A lot of sales shifted online, but even online delivery wasn't, well, online order was possible, but delivery were not easy in many places. Booksellers got creative, and those who had some online presence and displayed more creativity were able to weather the storm a bit better, but altogether it was very difficult. And even though online sales and digital sales increased a lot, this in most cases was not enough to match the loss in in-store sales. So what happened where bookshops did not close? There were a number of countries where this didn't happen. There were no full lockdowns. Still, things were not easy. You see countries like the Nordics or Estonia, Latvia, and the Netherlands, even there when bookshops did not have to close necessarily, there were drops in sales of 30, 40%, because in any case there were restrictions. People were obviously hesitant to go around to shop, so the impact was felt there as well. And what happened when bookstores reopened? Well, by then it was end of April, early May or mid-May. The damage was obviously done already. The whole sector for the year up to May had taken a good hit. 10, 15, 20% or more, and that's taken into account that the first 2.5 months of the year had been actually quite positive almost everywhere. During the lockdown, the damage is more evident, obviously, altogether, with losses of turnover around 50%, but also 60, even 70%, hundreds of millions of euros of missed sales all over Europe. In May and June, sales started picking up again, somehow with some uncertainty, so that at the reopening, for example, often there were spikes in sales followed by other slumps. In any case, restrictions remained in place, and still not everyone was comfortable going shopping physically. We must say there were also a few, we may say, lucky ones which were able to take advantage fully of the shift of sales online and to digital. Countries like Finland, Sweden, Netherlands, where during the lockdown there wasn't this significant decrease in sales. So trying to have a look at the prospects for the whole year and forecasts of what the impact could be across the 12 months, we must say at the very beginning, in March, April, the initial forecast was catastrophic. We were looking, if things didn't change, at losses between 30 and 50% of the overall turnover. At the end of June, so the data that is included in our report pointed at a slightly better situation, with losses between 10 and 30% in most territories, with a number of issues to be taken into account to also look at the more mid and long term, the dynamic effects of the pandemic. A certain level of fragility has been introduced in the value chain, with physical bookstores that are essential for the health of the overall sector being hit the hardest, and having an uneasy restart again with restrictions and a certain lack of confidence. Small publishers, in most cases, have been more affected, and those that depend more on sales in physical bookstores. Many players have financial difficulties, and the shift of sales to online and digital channels, while helpful, also means going towards less profitable models. We'll have to see what happens with the financial cycles and with the returns. When bookstores will return books from this year. Of course, we'll have to see what happens with the postponement of titles, and whether there will be a crowding of new titles towards the end of the year. There have been winners and losers. For example, children's books have done quite well, with a lot of children stuck at home, whereas travel books obviously have been almost wiped out of the market, unfortunately. We'll need to see what happens when public support measures, which have been very helpful in many countries, come to an end. And of course, the overall economic outlook and the situation of public budgets will be very important also. But to leave you with the glimmer of hope, from an update we received in September from our members, we see that the recovery has become much more solid over the summer based on readers' loyalty. People really wanted to go back to their books. And so sales were very good in many countries. The prospect for the year so points at, in most markets, possibly a loss of 5% or somewhere between 5% and being at the same level at 2019, which would make it a bad year, but not a disaster year. There will be a handful of countries that actually can rely on the same level of last year, or even are going to perform better than last year, but also some countries that still, as of now, expect more significant damage from the crisis. And then, of course, all depends on whether we can salvage the Christmas season, which is really extremely important for the book sector. So with this, I remind you once again, well, thank you for your attention. I remind you once again to check out our report on our website, and also to look forward for an update towards the end of the year. Thanks again, and